Order. Lorraine Beavers to move the motion.
Thank you, Ms Llewellyn. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I beg to move that this House has considered the administration of the Civil Service Pension Scheme. And I am grateful to my colleagues for attending this morning's debate. After reading many emails I have received from constituents, it is clear that the issue before us today is not just an admin problem. It has caused real worry, stress and financial hardship to the people who have spent decades serving the public, trusting that their pension will be paid properly and on time. The scale of the problem is now very large and affects people across the country. Since Capita took over running the scheme on the 1st of December 2025, the Public and Commercial Services Union has been flooded with complaints. Members report long delays, mixed messages and very poor service. This is happening while there is a large backlog of cases passed on from the previous providers, My CSP. Thousands of people are now stuck waiting. The result is stress, uncertainty and real financial hardship. This is not acceptable. The seriousness of this has been accepted at the highest level. Last week, Kat Little, Permanent Secretary at the Cabinet Office, wrote to the civil servants to admit that the service being provided falls short of what members should expect. You may give way. I'll give way.
Just a couple of weeks ago at Prime Minister's Questions, I raised an issue regarding a very young woman who's a civil servant trying to access her pension as she has only months to live. And unfortunately, that was an exceptionally difficult and heart-rending story. And thankfully, because of the appearance of Prime Minister's Questions, it was resolved very shortly afterwards. The point that was made then and since is it shouldn't take something at Prime Minister's Questions to get these issues resolved. And we need to get Capita, HMRC, and that whether it's a cabinet office or whoever, to sort these issues out as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I am grateful for the honourable gentleman's intervention, and I agree. The seriousness of this has been accepted at the highest level. Last week, Kat Little, Permanent Secretary at the Cabinet Office, wrote to the civil servants to admit that the service being provided falls short of what members should expect. That alone should worry us all. We have also seen reports that some former civil servants have been left without any pension income at all this month, because payments have not yet been made since Capita took over. I give way.
I thank my honourable friend very much for giving way and thank her for securing this debate. And we can see with the numbers here how serious it is. I've heard from a number of constituents, like she has, in the situation she's describing. One of my constituents, heartbreakingly, Colette Reeves, retired at the end of last year to care for her husband, who is now been diagnosed with dementia, and she's now struggling to pay her bills because of the delays, and despite repeated attempts to get answers, she has got nowhere accessing her pension or seeking support from the interim emergency fund. Would she agree with me that both the performance of Capita since they took over falls woefully short of what we should expect, and that it's crucial for our constituents to get clarity on how to access the interim fund as a matter of urgency?
I agree with you. Some retirees have had to borrow money just to pay bills because the expected pension payments or lump sums have not arrived, and no clear timescale has been given for when they will. This is not a one-off mistake. It is part of a longer pattern. The Public Accounts Committee has made clear that successive governments have failed for years to manage the outsourced contract properly.
Will my honourable friend give way on that point?
I give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and securing this very important debate. PCS members in my Liverpool Riverside constituency were on strike for a long time last year because of my CSP, because of the failures. Capita had the programme before, the contract before, and failed. Do you agree with me that those people who have been waiting and struggling need to be compensated as soon as possible?
I absolutely do agree with you. So, the move to Capita was meant to modernise the system and improve services. Instead, it has exposed poor planning and weak control. Since the transfer, the scheme has struggled to work properly. There have been late pension payments, missing lump sums, lost records, broken systems and long delays in answering calls. The scheme cannot even... I'll give way.
I'm really grateful. I was contacted by a constituent who is a former civil servant who has been waiting on the so-called helpline for over 2 hours on 6 occasions. It's a contradiction in terms to call it a helpline because this person was cut off continually. Does she think that that's completely unacceptable behaviour from Capita?
I do agree with you. It is completely unacceptable behaviour from Capita.
Just a reminder to members, when you see you, you're referring to myself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Same conventioners in the chamber.
I do apologise. The scheme cannot even say how many people are still waiting for their first pension payout. From what we are hearing, it is clearly thousands. Behind these failures are real people. I want to share some examples from my constituents who have agreed for their cases to be erased. John was a prison officer for 25 years. He has been receiving just a fraction of his pension for several months now. He was left on hold for 2 hours in December, only to be told that there was nothing Capita could do about it. Robert emailed to tell me that while the loan system is seen as a lifeline by many, Capita seem to be completely unequipped to deal with the system. Robert says that some of his former colleagues are even being directed to charities and citizens' advice. I give way.
Thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and like her, I could run off a litany of complaints from constituents about the service that they've received. But it's that real-world impact, I think, that the delays are causing that she's doing a brilliant job of highlighting. I've got a constituent, 36 years in the police service, who's currently unable to pay his mortgage or household bills, somebody who spent 28 years at the MOD, who has been forced to take out loans and borrow money from family members. I think the question I've got to ask is this any way to treat people who have dedicated their lives and their careers to public service?
I totally agree. This isn't any way to treat our civil servants. I also have Elaine, who's been waiting for a pension forecast since early December. She came to see me in January because she cannot plan her retirement at all. She doesn't know if she can retire, when she can retire, or what income she will have. Julie partly retired at the start of January after applying for her pension back in August. She has still not been paid. She waited 5 hours on the phone and was told no timescale could be given. She and her family are worried about paying bills, growing debts and whether her pension will be backdated. Paul retired from the Ministry of Defence last July. 7 months later, he has not received any pension and is living off his savings with no clear answers. Alison retired and sent her paperwork in September. She was told it would be done by December, only to be told later that there was no record of her case, and she was told to write to a PO box. Paul retired after 30 years of service. His forms were sent in on time. He has received no lump sum, no pension and no timescale. Julie has worked for the Department of Work and Pensions for 26 years. She carefully planned partial retirement, sent the forms months in advance. Her retirement date is now close, and yet she still has no pension forecast. Diane contacted my office about her husband, also a civil servant, who was diagnosed last year with a serious brain tumour. They have been waiting months for a pension forecast so they can plan their future. I'll give way.
I thank my honourable friend. I thank the member for Blackpool and North and Fleetwood for securing today's debate. Like her, I have a litany of complaints from constituents, from Antony, from Catherine, from Christopher, from Kevin, from Mike and Robert, and similar heartbreaking stories who've been in touch with me in recent weeks about the situation. So does my honourable friend agree that it's important that we have urgent action taken to ensure that consistent and timely pension payments are made for all those scheme members that we're both seeing in our constituencies?
Yeah. Oh. I am grateful for my honourable friend's intervention, and I do agree. Peter reached state pension age and gave plenty of notice and has heard nothing. After waiting 3 hours on the phone, he was told nothing had been done. He retired in good faith. The system let him down. These cases are not rare. The PCS have heard from people who cannot pay their rents or mortgages, who have missed bill payments, who have been charged fees by banks, who are suffering, who are borrowing money or relying on family, and who are suffering serious stress. Some are widows or widowers waiting months for their late partner's pension. This is a human crisis. PCS have said up to 8,500 people may have retired without receiving their pension. For many, this pension is their only income. When it does not arrive, the impact is immediate and severe. This is a failure on a huge scale. I also want to mention retired prison officers, like my constituent John, whose cases have been raised by the Prison Officers Association. These are people who have worked in tough and dangerous jobs. Many are now facing delayed pensions and missing lump sums. The POA is right to call for urgent action, clear timescales and fair compensation. I give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Public servants in Bournemouth East who gave decades of their life are struggling after providing service to all of us. Probation officers, youth justice workers, prison staff, court clerks, they are all struggling while Capita make mistake after mistake. Does she agree with me that being good at winning public service contracts is not the same as being good at delivering public service contracts? And we need accountability where people's lives are being harmed in my constituency.
I agree. I give way.
Thank you for giving way. She's making an excellent speech and we're all grateful for this opportunity to raise these cases. I've been contacted by a constituent who left the civil service in 1992 and more than 30 years later has still never received the pension she is owed. That's despite providing proof of service from HMRC and even repeated transfer requests, and even the civil service itself later locating her superannuation file. The scheme continued to exist, that no record existed. Does the honourable member agree that cases like this show that the failure is not just delay, but deep-rooted maladministration within our state, and the government must commit to ensuring people are paid the pensions they're legally entitled to?
I agree. Sorry. I forgot where I was. Many have faced delays to pensions and missing lump sums. The POE is right to call for urgent action, clear timescales and fair compensation. To deal with hardship, the Cabinet Office has announced interest-free loans of up to £10,000. This may help in the short term, but it is wrong that pensioners are being asked to borrow money that already belongs to them. This should never have been needed. What is more, those affected are being left in limbo about the operation of these loans. Given the mismanagement of this scheme, how can members have any confidence in Capita that Capita will know who is facing hardship and therefore eligible for these loans? PCS have made clear that many of these cases should have been completed before the handover, but were not. The Cabinet Office has accepted that more retirements late last year and more this year have made the backlog worse. Without a clear and well-resourced recovery plan, normal service could take many months to return. This is why Capita must urgently prioritise the cases of retirees, as over the coming months many could remain without any income whatsoever. Increase staffing capacity and ultimately devote every resource to clearing this backlog. The Cabinet Office has now brought in around 150 civil servants, mainly from HMRC, to help fix the problem. That is welcome, but it raises a simple question. If so many civil servants are needed to fix this, why is the work not being done inside the civil service? And is the government billing Capita for the work that these civil servants are having to do?
I congratulate my honourable friend for securing this debate. We're being told that a system of crisis payments is being put in place, but I'm still receiving correspondence from constituents in Liverpool, Walton, including this morning, that they are terrified that they will not be able to pay the bills at the end of this month. And my question, I think, is for the Minister of the Cabinet Office. What sanctions are going to be put in place to make sure that Capita actually act? Because my constituents are still, today, being totally ignored.
Thank you, Chair. This problem has a long history. Pensions administration used to be done in-house in 2012. It was moved out as part of the wider push to outsource services. Over time, government control was sold off, and my CSP came to an end in 2025. The new contract was awarded quietly, despite known pressures from rising retirements and major legal pension changes. Those decisions need to be looked at closely. PCS has called for Capita to focus first on hardship cases, including unpaid retirees, people about to retire, ill health cases and bereavement. It has also called for proper compensation schemes to cover interest, extra costs and distress. These are fair and reasonable demands. Capita and senior officials have apologised and promised recovery plans. Apologies matter, but they are not enough. When people are left without income through no fault of their own, action must follow. There must be clear responsibility, clear updates and clear deadlines. Hardship must come first. Hardship cases must come first, sorry. Resources must match and the size of the problem. People must be compensated for the harm caused. I therefore have 5 questions for the government. Firstly, will the Minister ensure immediate financial support and fair compensation for all those affected? Second, will she publish a clear recovery plan with a proper oversight? Third, will she ensure that Capita pauses voluntary exit schemes, increases staffing capacity and dedicates every available resource to clearing this huge backlog for retirees? Fourth, will she review how this contract was handled, including whether the service should return in-house? And fifth, will the Minister restate a simple promise that pensions earned through public service must be paid on time and with respect? Before the general election, my party promised Britain the biggest wave of insourcing in a generation. This farce has exposed just how important that promise was and remains. I urge this Labour government to make good on that promise. Civil servants give their working lives to this country in good faith. When that trust is broken, it is not just unfair to individuals, it is a failure of government that this House must address. I beg to move.
The question is that this House has considered the administration of the Civil Service Pension Scheme. We will need to keep backbench contributions to 3 minutes, and I call Anne Davies.
Cadeirydd, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I thank the honourable member for Blackpool North and Fleetwood for securing this debate. My corner of West Wales in Caerfyrddin is no different. Multiple constituents have come to me with unacceptable experiences of trying to access their civil service pensions as administered by Capita. Amongst them, Steve Dawkins, who retired this month after 24 years as a civil servant. Steve followed all the procedures, submitted his formal notice of retirement, but he hasn't received a formal acknowledgement of his pension claim, nor indication of when his lump sum or monthly pension payments can be expected. His salary has stopped and he is not eligible for his state pension until September. I've sent a letter again to Capita outlining Steve's case, urging for action. I've had an acknowledgement, but no action. Rhiannon Davies Lochin is another constituent who has contacted Capita multiple times to request her pension details, but hasn't received a response. She also requested an annual benefit statement and was told to wait to hear within 10 days. She never did. She had to resign from her job and was due to finish work yesterday, intending to retire. but still doesn't know her pension position. I've written to Capita. I haven't received a response. Sarah Rees, and we could go on to many more, but we'll finish with Sarah. February last year, Sarah applied to receive her pension early due to ill health. That application was lost, and similar to my honourable friend, she submitted again in July, and in November she was told that all the necessary paperwork had been received, but she didn't hear back until last week, when I raised Sarah's case during business statement, and it seemed to catch Capita's attention as Sarah has finally received a response and a lump sum. But the sum was miscalculated, so I've had to write to Capita again. And you've guessed it, no response. So, and basically, it's just not good enough. It's inexcusable that over 8,000 people who retired over 12 months ago still haven't received their pension payments. Retired and retiring civil servants left in this position should seek compensation and should have compensation. I joined the PCS's union's call for a bespoke compensation scheme that takes account of interest on overdue payments, the financial implications of delay, as well as the distress this scandal has caused them. Once the 90,000 backlog is rectified, all pension payments issued and compensation schemes set up, I urge the Minister and the Department to act on the Public Accounts Committee's report and consider bringing the civil servants' pensions back in-house to help stop the scandal from ever happening again.
Kate Osborne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Blackpool North and Fleetwood, for bringing forward this debate. Chair, I've been inundated with emails from my constituents in Jarrow and Gateshead East regarding their civil service pensions and the unacceptable delays that people are facing. This is not just a delay on paperwork, but something that is causing huge detriment to the lives of many people in my constituency and across the UK. This is an issue that could have been avoided. Indeed, I and others, including the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee, the National Audit Office and the Trade Union PCS, all raised concerns ahead of the transfer to Capita. Unfortunately, we are now seeing those concerns play out. Chair, I wrote to ministers on the 12th of January highlighting this and asking a number of questions. And whilst I received a response just yesterday ahead of this debate, it did not actually answer all of the questions and directed me to tell constituents to email Capita complaining about their system. Of course, they'd already done that, and I contacted Capita on constituents' behalf, but I've not had a response. And of course, I'm not surprised, as my constituents have been ignored and been waiting for months. The response I received from the Minister also says I hope constituents feel reassured, but Chair, I can tell you that they do not. It does not reassure my constituent Christine, who's 65 and who retired on the 2nd of December and has not received her pension or a lump sum. Every time she contacts Capita, she's told she will receive it in 10 days, and yet it still hasn't arrived, leaving her without money for months, including over Christmas. It does not reassure my constituent Pauline, who retired back in July and has still not received anything, repeatedly being told that her case is with the finalisation team. It does not reassure my constituent Jackie, who took early retirement to care for her grandson and help her son, and should have received a payment starting in August, but has received nothing. Or Christopher, who is 60 and lives on his own with no savings and no other income. He's now been 3 months without a pension payment. And there's Carol, another constituent who's 70 and doesn't know when she will get any money or even how much her monthly payment should be. None of these constituents of mine and many, many others who have been waiting for months are reassured. These are real people waiting for months now. So can I ask, will the Minister instruct Capita to prioritise the people who have been without money for months rather than continuing to process the volunteer exit scheme? And finally, will the Minister commit to a compensation scheme covering these delays that does not force my constituents to apply through the scheme's own laborious internal process?
For setting the scene. and we all owe the Honourable Lady a debt for bringing this forward, and our constituents especially would do that. I have some constituents who are close to defaulting on their mortgages without their appropriate pay, and we cannot allow Capita to continue to fob these people off. I spoke to the Minister beforehand. It's not the Minister's fault, it's Capita, but the Minister's got to... My constituent would say, and I hope this language is okay, Madam Chair, my constituent would say, it's time to kick ass in Capita. And I could say something maybe worse, and no, better not. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you better not.
Yeah. Let me read out an email. I want to quote this email sent by a lady who worked for almost 50 years in civil service in HMRC. Anyone who knows how to work the figures, this lady does, and she's powerless in the face of Capita. I joined the civil service in September 1977, retired from it on the 31st of December 2025. I worked in Inland Revenue, that then became the HMRC. I have not received any lump sum or final details of my pension. I telephoned Capita on the 13th of January after hanging on the line for 2 hours and 10 minutes, being 12th in the queue, and was told by Helen a chaser would be made to process. She was unable to let me speak with a manager or processing, and confirmed there are issues with logging, registering with the new pensions portal. I telephoned again, and after hanging on for nearly 5 hours, was told by Lily she would send an escalation today to her manager, Adrian. I asked for a call back, and whilst Lily agreed to make this request to her manager, she could not guarantee it could be done. I explained I could not get in onto the pension portal, and she advised the issues with it would not be sorted until March. This is a lived experience of a lady who has dedicated almost 50 years of her working life to the civil service, a lady who knew the penalties in place for those who are paid late, a lady who could listen to the extenuating circumstances that someone was going through. So I know the Minister's not responsible, but Capita needs, my goodness, they need a throttling, is what I would say, and not the extent of just to learn them a lesson. So 5 questions very quickly. What did the civil servant pensions not postpone the changeover to Capita until the issues with the existing scheme were resolved? When can deadlines for resolving the issues be set? Why was the resolution of the McLeod issues not adequately resourced? When will the remaining contingent decision procedures be issued? And is the affordability test going to be applied to civil service pensions? And if so, when? This is a clause in the pension scheme allowing them to reduce the pension if it looks likely to become unaffordable. These are the implications of what happens. They can find themselves with a pension that they thought was going to be less than it should have been. My concluding, and I'm very conscious of the time, and others who want to make a contribution, government knows that the country does not operate without our knowledgeable and hard-working civil servants. But our obligation to them does not end with their final day. It continues. We are feeling those who gave so much, and this must end right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
John McDonnell.
And I also think my honourable friend from Blackpool North and Fleetwood set out a comprehensive understanding of the situation at the moment. My latest is a border force guard who is planning his retirement, can't get the information, therefore he's had to delay retirement. Others not having their pensions paid, and really a serious plight that they're in at the moment. I chair the PCS parliamentary group. Let's be absolutely clear, this is a failed privatisation. It came in that obsession of the last government with privatisations in the early 2010s. The union at that point in time warned that there would be problems of this sort, and we also warned that actually what will happen on these privatisations is they get sold on, the companies get taken over, contracts are re-awarded. What I found shocking was Capita were awarded the contract in the first place, having lost the teachers' union contract for their pension. I find that extraordinary. That wasn't properly taken into account. Just on behalf of the union, people are aware that the General Secretary of the union has written now to make it absolutely clear. Let me just run through very clear so members are aware of what's happened. All the union is asking for is clarity about the disclosure of the resources that Capita and others are now putting into resolving this problem. What are the level of staff that are going to be devoted? What is the timetable for resolving this problem overall? Then also, the point that many members have made, there needs to be a direct instruction to Capita about dealing with the hardship cases, the bereavements, etc., the priorities that the members of the pension scheme itself have set out through their union. And the other issue is actually the union has said, look, we need an assurance that if there is a prioritisation taking place, the completion of the voluntary exit schemes should be delayed. It should be focused on getting the money out to those people who need it. But also, I'm aware, as has been reported, Angela MacDonald has been announced as setting up the recovery scheme in the current crisis. My worry is this, is that we might be here in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 4 years, whenever it is, because this privatisation has demonstrated it cannot work. That's why so many members now are saying, asking the government, please do not exclude the possibility of bringing this back into public administration. I don't want to be here pleading again with people who haven't had their pensions. And on that point, I'd like the Minister to answer really, is there a clause within the existing contract that actually allows for the termination of the contract if it's failed, as it is failing at the moment? Because that could give us the opportunity then of having a fresh look at bringing it back in-house.
Anna Dixon.
Madam Chair, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Ms Lewell, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for Blackpool North and Fleetwood, not only for securing this important debate, but for her excellent opening speech, which set out very comprehensively and with passion the impact that this is having on all of our constituents across the country. Madam Chair, as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, I'm well aware of the problems with the Civil Service Pension Scheme and contributed to the report that was published on this in October. And in that report, the committee, we highlighted a range of issues which we've heard already in the debate today. Poor customer service and staff retention at my CPS, long waits for pension options to be set out for those wishing to withdraw pensions, a failure from the Cabinet Office to manage transitions between suppliers, concerns over Capita's readiness to take this over, and whether the scheme administration overall was delivering on value for money. In the Cabinet Office's response in the Treasury Minute, which was around the time and beginning of December last year, reassured the committee that yes, everything was in place for the success of the transition. Capita had sufficient staffing, and reassured that Cabinet Office in the contract had indeed got sufficient penalties for poor performance. So I'd really like to hear from the Minister whether she agrees that the Cabinet Office underestimated the ability of Capita to take on administration and should indeed face consequences for severe failure. As we've heard, these issues are evident in my own constituency, and I can briefly talk about a couple. One, trying to claim civil service pensions since May 2025, long waits on the phones, emails unanswered, documents going missing. And since Capita took over, new problems, the portal not allowing logins and eventually getting through on the phone only to be cut off. This constituent is suffering from financial hardship and is still waiting for the lump sum. Another constituent approaching 60 wanted to claim a deferred pension from January this year. The forms were posted in August, were told he would receive a quote in November, didn't receive it, was unable to speak to Capita despite persistent contact, and the deferred pension, which would allow him to remain financially secure, instead has reduced his hours and is now facing financial hardship. And finally, a third, waiting for a lump sum to pay on partial retirement. Again, correct forms were sent in, lump sum not received, and again, no communications. These examples are rife. Given the terrible hardship and worry this fiasco has caused, could I urge the Minister to explain what urgent action she is taking to rectify the situation and ensure Capita pay the price and not our public service pensioners? Thank you.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you. It's a pleasure as ever to serve under your chairmanship, Ms Lewell. I want to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Blackpool North and Fleetwood, for bringing this really important discussion to the Commons. I also want to declare my interest as a trade union member and refer to the fact that I received support from the trade unions at the last election. Ms Lewell, I think it's really important that we recognise who we're talking about here. We're talking about ordinary people, ordinary folk. Many of these people we're discussing today are people who have worked in the civil service shamefully for many government departments, who have been claiming benefits for years because the wages are that low.
And that's the sort of people, the vast majority of people we're talking about here. The people who brought us through the pandemic. Let me not forget that. And there's lots in my constituency of Blythe and Ashington, and I've got a number of examples which I'm not sure if I'll be able to get through today. The root problem here, as my honourable friend mentioned, is privatisation. The initial privatisation by the Tories was in 2012. It was initially DWP, stroke Capita, then my CSP, which was a disaster. How on earth is Capita getting this secret contract agreed in 2023 to take place in 2025? It's an absolute outrage. Look at the situation now. Promised transition would be fine. Look, my PSC had 16,000 unopened emails when Capita retook over the scheme. There's 1.7 million scheme members. There's a backlog of 90,000. There's 8,500 retired members not in receipt of any pension. And what about the ill health and bereaved? There's hardship, Miss Llewellyn, and there's also issues with regards to the interest-free loans which have been promised. Sorry?
My honourable friend is making a very good speech. Isn't it important that this Labour government shows how it is different and deals differently with these failed privatisations?
Thanks very much for that intervention. I totally agree with that. Can I refer to three of my constituents? Mr Brown from the Bedlington. He retired in December. He cannot get any response whatsoever to the inquiries he's got. Mr Newell worked in the civil service for 40 years. He's got a number of questions which I'll send to my right honourable friend with regard to Capita. You know, he spent 21 hours in total on the telephone waiting for a response. And he had additional problems. And there's a problem with the portal. The people cannot access details to the portal. And that was an issue raised by Mr Davies from Chopperton in my constituency. Three real issues. We need to pause a voluntary exit scheme and focus on those people who aren't in receipt of their pensions at this moment in time. There needs to be more resourcing, more staff employed to get rid of the backlog. And again, as my honourable friend said, we need to consider at some time whether Capita is actually carrying out the job they're supposed to. It's time to have a look at Capita, see if they're doing the job correctly. If they're not, penalties must apply.
Jenny Riddle-Carpenter.
Under your chairmanship. And can I start by thanking my honourable friend, the member for Blackpool North and Fleetwood, for bringing forward this debate, but speaking so articulately. I won't repeat so many of the points that have been made today by so many colleagues across the House. Madam Chair, I'm going to use this chance of 2.5 minutes now just to talk about my casework, because I want to say to my constituents, I had a meeting yesterday with the Minister. I was reassured by the seriousness in which the government's taking it. But I am disgusted with how Capita are handling this. And I want to make sure in every single email that I send to Capita, I'm referencing this debate here and referencing the case that I'm bringing forward. So I've had about 10 correspondents, the first of whom is Kathleen Cassie, and again, I'll be using these minutes in my correspondence with Capita. She took partial retirement in November. She's received no lump sum and no payments, and I haven't had a response from Capita in chasing them. Maxine Fuller, planning for retirement. She's written 4 times, phoned twice, sent 3 messages on the portal, and surprisingly, she's had no response. The story, as you can imagine, continues. Now, Chris Fryer, I should say all of these are happy to be named in Parliament. Chris Fryer retired a year ago and hasn't received a single penny after spending his entire career working for the Border Force as an officer. He has contacted them, and again, the same story as it remains, he has had no response. That's a year of not being able to make payments that we should be able to take for granted, mortgage payments and the like. And then I have Lisa Andrews, similar story again. She's a serving police officer, 37 years. She applied for partial retirement in December the 1st. She got cut off the portal. She has not been able to have any correspondence with them. She received a lump sum after chasing but not hearing back, but she now awaits the monthly partial pension payment, and lo and behold, quelle surprise, she hasn't received it on January the 1st. I've had many, many more examples, some of whom don't want to be referenced because, and I quote, without naming them, they were on the phone yesterday and there were 183 in the queue. They are now terrified that if I name them in Parliament, they will be sent to the back of the queue and they'll be penalised further. I've had about 10 constituents, Madam Chair, reach out on this. They are terrified. They have spent many, many years serving this country through the civil service, dedicating their life to it. They should be able to look forward to their retirement, either partial or full, and they have been let down by Capita. And I think I'm really looking forward to what the opposition have in their response and how they brought this contract forward with a lack of scrutiny. And there has not been enough challenge on you today for this. And thank you, Madam Next to you. I've got to leave it there because my anger is rising.
Yeah. Emma Foodie.
Serve under your chairship. Like many in this debate, I wanted to share the real impact that the serious concerns with the administration of the Civil Service Pension Scheme are having on my constituents. In the North East, this issue is particularly acute. We have one of the largest HMRC and DWP offices in the country in Benton Park View, often known locally as the Ministry, employing thousands of people. And civil service jobs have long been a backbone of our local economy, with many local people given decades of their life to public service and then now being let down at the point where they should be able to rely on the system the most. I'm contacted regularly by constituents who are spending hours on the phone, sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours just trying to get an update on their pension, often then told that no one can help them or that they'll receive a call back in 7 to 10 days. Except, of course, that call never comes. People are left with no information, no timescales and no way to resolve their issues. One constituent who already had a pension in payment is now being double taxed because of Capita, incorrectly telling HMRC that she'd started a new pension rather than continuing her existing one. And despite repeated attempts to fix this, there has been no joy. One civil servant with 43 years of service applied for partial retirement in August to start this year. All paperwork submitted, no confirmation, no payment, nothing. After more than 4 decades of service, they are denied even the certainty of a planned retirement. Another constituent with 29 years of service claimed their pension in July and has still received neither their lump sum nor any ongoing payments. As a result, having to rely on credit cards, incurring additional interest and struggling to meet mortgage payments, all because money that they are entitled to has not been paid. I've also been contacted about a widows and orphans scheme refund of £1,940 due since July, which remains unpaid. For families dealing with bereavement, delays like this can only add to the strain that they are already under. And Chair, as we've heard, these are not isolated cases, pointing to some systemic problems in how this scheme is being administered. Civil servants have upheld their side of the bargain. It is only right that the system does the same. So I urge ministers to examine Capita's performance closely, but also to recognise that my CSP failures before that need to be taken into account as well. And I and colleagues want to hear what action is being taken to ensure that people receive their pensions accurately, promptly and with the respect they deserve, but also what action will be taken with Capita and my CSP to hold them to account for their failure.
Ensure all members wishing to speak do get to make a contribution. We're going to reduce the time limit to 2.5 minutes, and I call Sally Jameson.
Under your chairship, I refer members to my register, which declares my various union membership. Many colleagues here today have made very, very valid points. I'm going to try and not re-echo them. I do just want to follow on from what my honourable friend just said there about my CSP. I know from personal experience and the experiences of my colleagues in the prison service, they were absolutely appalling. And just when you thought their level of incompetence couldn't get any worse, they managed to surpass themselves. So I don't think any of us shed a tear that they had the contract taken away from them. And I'm sure Capita are full of excuses saying, well, we had a terrible inheritance, my CSP did
X, Y and Z, and that's true, but Capita have a huge amount of resource, people and money, and they should have known what they were getting themselves in for. They should have known how bad CSP was, known how bad the backlog was, and if they couldn't take on the job, they shouldn't have taken on the contract. I've got constituents like Billy, who is considering perhaps taking partial retirement, and now he doesn't want to do it because he doesn't know if he's going to get his money, and he's actually scared, so he's denying himself time away from work and partial retirement because of how appalling Capita are. So there's a couple of things I want to know from the Minister today. I want to know what review is going to be done into the mismanagement of this contract, but also how the decision was taken. I totally appreciate this was done by the previous government, and therefore the Minister can't answer for that. But what official advice was given to those ministers in the last government about this contract, particularly around break clauses, because this is abject failure and we should be able to get out of this contract. So what were the officials in the department advising those ministers around this? Because this level of failure, I'm afraid to say, requires accountability, and people that were involved in this procurement should never be involved in procurement for a government contract again, and we need to know who they are and what price they're going to pay for this, because taxpayers are footing the bill for this failure yet again, and it's totally unacceptable. This was not Capita's first rodeo. They've been on the failure train many, many times before. The fact that they were given another contract is deeply, deeply worrying. So I also would like the Minister to confirm that Capita won't be allowed to bid for any future government contracts, at the very least until this is resolved, and at the very least until the taxpayer has been compensated for what they've had to pay for to date. As far as I'm concerned, it's been said before, this kind of thing should be brought back in-house, but I'd be interested to know what work's being done to see if this is possible.
Ewan Steenbank.
Ms Lowell, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. Those who serve the public deserve dignity and respect as they go into retirement. After a lifetime of putting their shoulder to the wheel to keep the country running, this is not what my constituents in Falkirk, impacted by these delays, feel they are receiving. They feel utterly, utterly let down by my CSP and Capita. When Capita won the contract under the Tories, they promised the world. Improvements to service levels and response times, and justifying proposed reduced staff levels through a more efficient IT system. Looking at the value of the contract and the reputation of Capita at the time following their management of the Teachers' Pension Scheme, serious questions arise for the then Tory ministers to whether this contract should have been signed off or not in November 2023. Transitional arrangements between my CSP and Capita failed to plan for the scale of the backlog and correspondingly failed to plan for the required additional staffing, as warned by the Public Accounts Committee in October. Those warnings were not heeded, and now it has had human consequences. Mary was supposed to retire with her pension last week, but without any time to make alternative plans and hours on the phone, was callously told to wait her turn. This was months after applying and the ball being firmly in Capita's court. Andrew, after a workplace injury forced him to retire, has not received his pension, nor the capability payment tied to his scheme after 40 years of guarding Scotland's prisons. Multiple additional constituents are waiting 9 months and counting to receive death and service payments following their spouses tragically passing away, leaving this situation directly responsible for their financial hardship and aggravation of the emotional devastation they feel. Those facing hardship and crisis and those at imminent risk of retiring with no income must be prioritised in the backlog, and I have and will continue to write to the Minister and Capita with each of their stories. I welcome the interest-free hardship loans of up to £5,000 and £10,000 for those in exceptional circumstances secured by Labour ministers. This must move at pace for those in Falkirk and across the country who urgently need support. Capita must urgently state what additional resources they are providing to clear this backlog so that this crisis is fixed and paid for by the taxpayer-funded contractor and not by the taxpayer swooping in to the rescue any more than is necessary. Once this backlog and crisis is cleared, the recovery team must have a clear mandate to consider whether reversing this failed privatisation my honourable friend referred to is the right way forward. All contractual options available to the Cabinet Office once this crisis is resolved must be considered. I've heard that this contract is stronger than the preceding My CSP contract. My question to the Minister is, stronger in what way, and what further actions will be considered once the priority work of getting people sitting, waiting on their pensions is completed? Thank you, Ms Lowell.
Jane Kirkham.
My honourable friend, the member for Blackpool North and Fleetwood, for securing this debate. It's absolutely crucial for my constituents who've dedicated their entire careers to public service at naval air stations, at the Inland Revenue, at DEFRA. They all got in touch with me as a last resort due to delays and lack of information. I welcome the urgent recovery plan that has been put in place by Angela MacDonald's team, but we need more clarity on a timeline for when those outstanding pensions matters will be resolved. My constituents have highlighted issues with accuracy. Simon found the figures he received were incorrect. When he questioned this, the answer from my CSP was to wait until January and contact the new provider. They would sort it out. Meanwhile, Mark, who worked at HMRC, noticed, according to the new website, his nominated beneficiary is his dad, who has been dead for many decades. He queried this and was told it's actually his wife, but the website has still not been updated. David said, I heard nothing. I called many times and was on hold for 90 minutes to 2 hours. The line kept going dead after saying I got from number 105 to around 45 in that time. I got through 3 times this month, and each time the call handler promised escalation, telling me I'm with the finalisation team, but still nothing. I would like to know what steps are being taken by Capita and the Cabinet Office to improve this, and what penalty clauses have been triggered for this. Is consideration being given to forfeiture of the contract? What targets, hard targets, has Capita been set to get through this backlog? Did my CSP breach their contract? What penalties have they paid? When I was a councillor, I chaired Cornwall Local Government Pension Scheme, which managed to deal with 60,000 members and £2.3 billion. They had proper resource in place to deal with the McLeod judgment, above other things, and everybody gets their pension on time. That's done in-house. Why can't these civil servants who've worked their whole life in public service have the same measure of fairness and respect?
Lee Ingham.
Thank you, Ms Llewellyn. I thank the honourable member for Blackpool North and Fleetwood for securing this vital debate. Like some of my colleagues today, I want to speak about the human cost of the failures in the administration of the Civil Service Pension Scheme, and I do so with permission of my constituents. They relate to some of the my CSP cases previously but have been handed over to Capita. Sally Clementson was a civil servant who paid into a pension throughout her working life and sadly died in January last year. Her husband Mark has waited months following her bereavement claim without hearing anything about the widow's pension. During that time, he's been anxious, he's suffered distress and serious financial hardship whilst grieving for his wife. Tragically, Mark died himself in November. To this day, having never received a penny of the pension his wife had earned, and to this day, his family have received no pension payments to help cover the funeral costs or mounting bills. And their latest response they received from Capita states that this is due to the backlog. But it's not an isolated case. Another constituent of mine, Debbie Bowen, died in 2024. Her sister, Joanne Wilson, spent over a year chasing Debbie's pension. Solicitors were promised escalation and contact within 12 weeks, but alas, no contact came. Repeated calls throughout December and January led to the same assurances, but still no resolution. Joanne has described feeling utterly frustrated and actually just worn down through it all. And let me be clear, these aren't complex claims. I know all of you have got some really complex claims. They're not disputed claims. These are bereaved families being left without answers, without dignity and without money. I am absolutely apoplectic, to be absolutely frank. It's unacceptable for workers to be in this position or families to be in this position. So I do want to ask the Minister, and I'm echoing comments of my colleagues here, what immediate steps are being taken to prioritise bereavement cases within the scheme. And also, I think more broadly, my question is, when companies like Capita repeatedly fail public services, and let's be frank, it isn't just pension schemes where they've done it, why is this not considered during procurement process? I used to work in procurement, and certainly I considered previous performance when I was awarding contracts. It seems to me absolutely baffling that a contract was awarded when there was such a record of non-performance previously. So I would like to ask the opposition minister why this wasn't considered to be the case when they awarded the contract.
Annalise Midgley.
Pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and as so many colleagues here today have said, at the heart of this is people who have worked as public servants, many for decades. Everything that I'm getting into my mailbox are lives where people have tried to do the right thing, hard-working people, and it's just not fair, is it? I've got constituents who are afraid of losing their homes because they can't pay their mortgages, they can't pay their credit card bills, they can't pay their electricity and gas bills. But I think here lies a bigger issue, because it's stuff like this why the public have lost faith in us, because it's not the first time that something like this has happened. And so there needs to be accountability. And I've got some questions. Why were Capita, who have a list of incompetence, as both my right honourable friend from Hayes and Harlington and Doncaster Central have said, they've got a list of incompetence and crisis under their belt, including on public service pensions, awarded this contract. What advice was given to Tory ministers and by which officials when this contract was awarded? What commitments have Capita given to this government in terms of resource to clear the backlog? And what firm timelines have Capita given to the government in terms of that backlog clearance? And crucially, if they don't hit those targets, what are the consequences? Because do they just get away with it? A fine, a slap on the wrist, maybe a newspaper story? What constitutes failure in this, if this is already not failure? Because, as I said at the start of this, at the heart of this are people's lives. And if the government don't get to grips with this, we'll be back here again, as my right honourable friend from Hayes and Harlington said. And I can see, in a few years' time, an ITV series with Toby Jones starring in it. So I would like to thank the government for the stick and plaster that they have put on in terms of the loans for those that need it most. But the taxpayer is once again stepping in terms of failure and incompetence and maladministration. And I urge the Cabinet Office to do the right thing and make sure that everything is done for the people who've worked hard all of their lives and that they get their pensions paid.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I want to thank my honourable friend from Blackpool North and Fleetwood for securing this important debate, because it concerns a crisis affecting thousands of public servants who now find themselves without a pension they have earned, and in some cases without any income at all. These people have paid into a scheme throughout their careers with the reasonable expectation that when they retire, they will get their money. It is their deferred salary. Instead, we have witnessed from my CSP and Capita nothing short of shambles. The previous government awarded Capita a 7-year contract worth £239 million to administer the scheme. And the warning signs were there, Chair. And where are they today to apologise and answer? It is shameful. This result has been chaos. And I want to highlight the human impact. I would like to share the experience of some of my constituents bearing the brunt of this failure. One former Ministry of Defence employee has medically retired on the 11th of December. His lump sum and monthly payments are due to start on the 12th. He has received nothing. Another constituent retired from the ONS on the 27th of November, giving 4 months' notice. He was told his lump sum would be paid within 1 week. He has received nothing. I have a constituent who has worked for HMRC for 26 years. She is due to retire but cannot get a pension quote from Capita. She cannot plan a retirement or make informed decisions. I have a constituent who retired from HMRC on 30th of December. He is waiting for a lump sum of £94,000. He has confirmed receipt of documents, but he has received nothing. Finally, I want to mention a constituent who has worked in the Naval Fleet Support for 38 years. He decided in June 25 he would retire. Since then, the communication has been abysmal. He has received not a single penny of his pension. Chair, they are not isolated cases. These delays are causing genuine hardship. People are unable to pay their bills, depleting their savings, borrowing from family members, and some from very other sources, which is costing them even more money. The stress it's causing is horrendous. I acknowledge that the government has appointed an expert recovery team led by Angela MacDonald, and I welcome the hardship initiative plan. However, this doesn't address the fact that it's a flawed procurement process, selecting a contractor who was not ready to go live. I'm calling for transparency. Capita must publish detailed performance data. Accountability. The Cabinet Office must make full use of its contractual rights. If Capita fails to meet recovery plan milestones, there must be serious consideration of whether they should continue to hold this contract. And finally, compensation for those who have suffered financially hardship from Capita. This crisis raises fundamental questions about how we contract out the administration of critical public services.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Cameron Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. It's an honour to serve under your chairship, and credit to the member for Blackpool North for bringing forward this important debate. She can so often be found calling out injustice. As is clearly the case for many other MPs, recent weeks have brought forth an abundance of correspondence from constituents, frustration at unsatisfactory communication from Capita, and the anxiety born of missed pension payments. Many of those who have experienced missed pension payments have provided years or even decades of their lives to public service across key departments, not least the Ministry of Defence and the Crown Prosecution Service. One such constituent of mine expressed that she completed her My Civil Service pension application in July 2025, but it then received no further communication until discovering in November that the portal had closed. Having then created a Capita account in December, she has sent 3 messages via the portal, attempted to call the hotline 4 times, to date, all without a response. Another is a retired MOD civil servant who had worked at RAF Innsworth, now Imgin Barracks, and home to the Joint Casualty and Compassionate Centre. She had submitted all of her documentation as required, but told me that at the end of November, all telephone lines were ceased, emails bounced back undelivered, and the portal had been closed. She described how her experience had only worsened after Capita reopened the portal, which had apparently been untested and did not allow her to log in at all. The absence of meaningful communication significantly compounded the stress to my constituent, and those affected still have no timeline to seeing their pensions paid. Capita's initial explanation that these symptoms were merely teething troubles should do nothing to convince any of us that this organisation fully understands the implications of these missed payments. It has more recently admitted to serious issues, and the true scale is a backlog of apparently 86,000 cases. None of this should surprise the government or anybody else here. I recall significant delays in the Armed Forces recruitment process during a period where Capita mismanaged medical assessments. Issues similar to those faced currently were reported in the administration of the Teachers' Pension Scheme, again by Capita. In October 2025, the Public Accounts Committee had warned the government of a clear risk that Capita would not be ready to take on full administration in December, calling on the Cabinet Office to explain how it would ensure sufficient staffing and resourcing. At the heart of this issue are 1.7 million current and former civil servants who just want the peace of mind that the pensions they have earned through years of public service will be handled fairly, with dignity, and if at all possible, a base level of competence. The Liberal Democrats, therefore, have questions for the government and for the Shadow Minister. I hope that in their closing speeches, they will answer some of the following. To the Minister, in light of this situation, what steps is the government taking to support individuals who have mortgages to pay, families to feed, and all manner of expenses for which they are currently being denied payment? Perhaps the Shadow Minister could answer how his government assessed Capita's role in the administration of the Teachers' Pension Scheme, where similar issues were hitherto reported. Perhaps he could explain, did Capita's role in the administration of the Teachers' Pension Scheme factor in the awarding of this contract? To the Minister, Capita claims that the backlog it inherited was over twice the size they had anticipated. Who is responsible for this? My CSP, Capita, this government, or the last? And if the solitary Conservative representative could answer, the value of this contract is £239 million over 7 years. Given their history of mismanagement, by what metrics were Capita determined to have won this contract? Could the Minister answer, hauntingly, this contract includes an option to extend from 7 to 10 years. Will this mismanagement factor in determining whether the government decides to extend it? And finally, for the government, we can all sit here and empathise and complain about Capita, but we must take lessons from it. What lessons will this government take from this fiasco? Thank you.
Opposition spokesperson, Mike Wood.
Thank you, Ms Lowell, and I congratulate the honourable member for Blackpool North and Fleetwood for securing this important and timely debate, because this situation is an entirely unforced error by Capita that has caused real and significant financial distress to thousands of former public servants, people who dedicated their working lives to serving this country. The people affected are individuals who planned responsibly for retirement, who relied on the integrity of the civil service pension scheme and have instead been left anxious, frustrated and in many cases desperate. Like other honourable members, several of my own constituents have contacted me to say that they have been left without any income to fall back on. People like Mark, who contacted Capita at the start of this year, has contacted them several times without any reply at all, and who now finds that the previous letters and emails he had from my CSP, none of the links work anymore. There was no transition. And in many cases, reported by colleagues from across the country, those affected are suffering missed mortgage payments, unpaid bills, and the indignity of having to borrow money simply to get by. And that should never happen to anyone who has served the public in good faith. Of course I will give way.
The honourable gentleman sets out, as many members have in this debate, many of the hardships and challenges. Would the honourable gentleman take some responsibility that under the previous government, when this contract was let, that these problems should have been foreseen and the contract never awarded to Capita?
Now, I'm sure the honourable lady will accept that because I wasn't a minister in the previous government, I don't have access to the tendering process or to the details of the bid, other than to say, as I will come on to, there was clear failure by the previous providers, and there have been many, many opportunities since the last general election to have reviewed that contract in light of the clear failure. Please.
Probably quite right to address that there were significant failings by the previous provider. Does he accept that there were clear failings by the previous government?
Now, I mean, the honourable gentleman is obviously trying to hide from the fact that his party was actually part of the government that obviously awarded that contract in 2012 to the joint mutual venture. So I think he may wish to look perhaps at his own party's part in that if he thinks that that was now a mistake. But sadly, the information provided by the Minister for the Cabinet Office to colleagues last week falls well short of what is required, because it fails to address the fundamental question of how the government allowed Capita to take over the contract in December despite the repeated warnings and signs that they had clearly failed in their key milestones. I must continue because I do only have a short period. I have given way twice. Because we know that in November 2023, Capita was awarded the contract to administer the Civil Service Pension Scheme. But we also know, as has been said, that the previous administrator, MyCSP, had its contract extended until December 2025, specifically to allow for a 2-year transition period that was meant to reduce risk, not to create it. And the National Audit Office investigation published in June 2025 made it clear that MyCSP had been failing to meet agreed service levels in the final year of its contract, with complaints more than doubling towards the end of MyCSP's contract. And that is, of course, a large part of the reason why the contract was awarded elsewhere. And if I may just briefly refer to the tragic case of Philippa, not a constituent, but someone who I did have the pleasure of meeting because she was a long-term partner of member of staff of one of our colleagues. Philippa was an officer of the Home Office who retired last May.
Order. It's up to the member if he wishes to give way. He's made it clear he doesn't wish to.
I have already given way twice, and I may give way later, but I do need to get through my speech so the Minister can reply, because I know members will want to hear a response. Now, Philippa retired in May and suffered nervous collapse triggered by pension delay. Tragically, Philippa died on Boxing Day. So this is the very real human cost. But of course, the National Audit Office report didn't stop with the failings of the final years of CSP's contract. It also highlighted that Capita itself had failed to meet 3 of the 6 key transition milestones that were due by March 2025, all relating to scheme design and operational readiness. In other words, the warning signs were there in black and white. Ministers were on notice of the potential for serious problems and of the consequences those problems would have for pensioners for at least the final half of 2025. Of course, I will give way to my statutory colleague.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Would the honourable member agree with me that the warning signs were there when they failed on the TPS scheme as well?
Yeah.
Obviously, as I've said, I didn't see the details of the bid. I think that obviously with any bidding, of course, it would be right to look at previous performance. And I think with almost any bidders who are putting in for large government contracts, there will be some causes for concern with any of the bidders because of the complexity of these contracts without having seen the deep. I will call for the right honourable gentleman.
Maybe the ministers at the time didn't see the army recruitment fiasco, the fiasco of capital at primary care, where they said it actually put patients at risk, the teachers' pension scheme near collapse, and then the cyber attack where they exposed the data of 6.5 million people and were fined millions. Doesn't the honourable member think the government minister might have taken those into account before awarding this contract?
Now, I appreciate the right honourable gentleman hasn't always been an unfailing, an uncritical friend of the current government, but he has to recognise that his party has been in government for more than a year and a half now, during which there were opportunities, if they're unhappy with that contract, to take action, because, as we said, the warning signs were there in black and white. Ministers were on notice of that potential and of the potential consequences. And despite that, on 7th of July of last year, a full year into this government, the Permanent Secretary told the Public Accounts Committee that the Cabinet Office would decide in December whether Capita should take over administration. And on 14th of November 2025, the Cabinet Office wrote to trade unions confirming that that was the case. The Capita would indeed take over from 1st of December, stating that it was satisfied. This government, this Permanent Secretary, this Minister's Department was satisfied the Capita had taken on board the findings of those reports. So serious questions do have to be answered. What assurances were provided by Capita to ministers before that final decision was taken at the end of last year? And what scrutiny was applied to those assurances, and by whom? And why, in his letter to colleagues, did the Minister for the Cabinet Office claim that these issues had only come to his attention in recent weeks, when both the National Audit Office report in June and the Public Accounts Committee report in October were warned of a clear risk the Capita would not be ready? The Public Accounts Committee was very clear. The Capita had missed 7 out of its 8 key transitional milestones to deliver its IT system, and said that the Cabinet Office must fully develop contingency plans. So, if the Minister is right that he was only made aware in recent weeks of these problems, shouldn't the government have known far sooner and acted far sooner? So whilst it is welcome that interest-free hardship loans are now available, it's clear that this action has come too late. Those loans should have been made available on an emergency basis from the 1st of December, the same day the Capita took over administration, so that people were not left in financial limbo. Instead, some pensioners have reported being forced to take out costly commercial loans or to borrow from friends and family simply to cover basic living costs. That is unacceptable. So can I ask the Minister directly, can she guarantee that no one affected will face further disruption beyond the end of this month? Can she guarantee that pension payments will be stabilised fully and permanently? Because the warning signs, as I said, were there for months, and the failure to act decisively after the publication of the National Audit Office and Public Accounts Committee report is stark. And whilst it is deeply disappointing that the government did fail to prevent this from happening, we can all agree that it is now in everyone's interest. I've given way 4 times. I think I really ought to conclude. We can all agree that it is now in everyone's interest for operational stability to be restored as quickly as possible, for the government to ensure rigorously and transparently that Capita meets its contractual obligations consistently, and that any penalty clauses in the contract that can be enforced are enforced to allow for compensation to be paid to those affected. Because above all, we owe it to those affected, public servants who did everything asked of them, to put this right and to ensure that such a failure doesn't happen again.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Ms Lewis. It's always a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And before we begin, I'd like to draw honourable members' attention to my entry in the list of Minister's interests. I myself have a civil service pension, having started my career in the Home Office in 2001. It's tradition to thank the honourable member who brought a debate like this, but I honestly think I want to place on record my personal thank you to her on behalf of my constituents affected by this and on behalf of all the constituents who we've heard from today, because I think this is a perfect example of bringing voices to Parliament that have not been heard, that have been sat in queues and phone lines, and you've brought their everyone has brought their stories very, very powerfully to Parliament today and to the heart of government, and I want to thank her for doing that public service. So it's much appreciated. I also would like to thank all the honourable members who've raised issues on behalf of their constituents on this matter. It's been, of course, extremely troubling to hear these stories told, but as I said, it's also a testament, I think, to the system in this country where an MP can bring the experience and voice of their constituents to government, and I thank everyone that's spoken today. I also want to start by thanking and paying tribute to all of our fantastic public servants who give so much in service of our country and our communities. When a civil servant retires after decades of public service, they deserve a seamless transition into the next chapter of their lives and recognition of the contribution they've made over their career. They deserve a system that is accurate, that is responsive, and above all, is timely. And I want to state clearly and for the record, the service that has been experienced by members of the Civil Service Pension Scheme is absolutely unacceptable. Although this 10-year contract, as we've heard, was signed by the previous government in 2023, and I could sit here and talk about another disastrous inheritance, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stand here and take responsibility and apologise, because I think that's what today should be about, the people who are affected by this service. I've read the accounts of members, many of whom have written to their local MPs, and I've seen that correspondence. I've heard the concerns and listened very, very carefully to all the individual cases raised by members today. I'm really deeply sorry for the worry and distress that this has caused so many people, particularly to colleagues dealing with bereavement and those with ill health and those experiencing financial hardship. This is a failure, there's no two ways about it, and resolving this is a matter of absolute utmost urgency for this government. We're taking direct action to intervene and put this right, to do so as quickly as possible whilst ensuring accuracy. And I'm going to set out in response to questions that colleagues have made the steps that we're doing to undertake that. To understand how we fix this, though, I just want to say something quickly about how we arrived here. As I mentioned, the decision to transfer to Capita with a 10-year contract was made in 2023. The Cabinet Office will undertake a full review of the award and management of our previous pension contracts, as colleagues have asked for today. Once we've resolved the immediate issue in service delivery, I think you're right, colleagues will rightly, honourable members will rightly share our view that the priority is getting people their money and resolving the immediate problem first and foremost. On the 1st of December 2025, the administration of the scheme transferred from MyCSP to Capita. While the core payroll for 730,000 existing pensioners continues to be paid correctly and on time, the transition for new retirees has been a mess, with a large number of members significantly impacted. The main driver of these delays is the high volume of work that Capita inherited from MyCSP, approximately 86,000 work-in-progress cases, which was more than twice the volume planned for and understood to be anticipated during the due diligence and planning period. In addition to these work-in-progress cases, the handover included 15,000 unread email messages, and there were delays in loading and correctly mapping the vast amounts of data transferred from MyCSP to Capita, and technical issues were identified in setting up and receiving data interfaces between employers and the new administrator. As at the week commencing 19th of January, the Capita reporting showed there are approximately 8,500 recently retired colleagues waiting for their first monthly pension payment. While some of those individuals have now received their one-off tax-free lump sum, the delay in implementing regular pension benefit payments is causing genuine hardship, especially for those relying on their pension payment to pay for basics, as we've heard today, such as rent, food, mortgages and heating. Shockingly, the report also showed 6,300 open cases relating to deaths, where members of past and bereaved families are trying to understand and settle financial affairs. And I don't underestimate the trauma of having to deal with this for many families. That includes 300 sensitive death in service cases, and that's added huge financial worries to grieving families, and it's simply unacceptable. Member data is held by employers and fed through to Capita via via secure interface on a monthly basis. This enables pension records to be updated for any changes to their personal data and employment terms and contracts. A transition of this scale requires the handover of huge amounts of complex personal data. More positively, Capita has now received the data it requires from the previous administrator. However, the switch of provider has meant that members are now required to register on a new portal, and I know, as colleagues have highlighted, there have been some huge problems with the portal. In addressing all these live issues, we must also understand the complexity of the civil service pension scheme. It's made up of 5 different pension schemes, approximately 1.7 million members, 320 employers. It's the 3rd largest public sector scheme and deals with an average of more than 3,000 retirements and more than 2,700 bereavement cases every month. That's the scale of the challenge, but as I said, I want to move to outlining exactly what we're doing to address these problems as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Although this, as we've heard, is a corporate failure, the government is stepping in, and it's thanks to the hard work of many of our civil servants who are working 24/7 to step in and resolve this. My officials, along with expert colleagues from across the civil service, are working closely with senior leaders in Capita and have agreed a way forward with a full recovery plan, and I'm grateful to them for their hard work. We've appointed Angela MacDonald, the second permanent secretary and deputy chief executive of HMRC, to lead a recovery task force. This team is working alongside Capita and departmental leaders to execute a plan organised into intensive 3-week sprints. On resources, we're deploying a 150-person civil service surge team, specifically to clear the correspondence logjam. Capita therefore now has over 650 staff dedicated to this contract, an increase of more than 50% in resourcing compared to the previous provider. Since 26th of January, the recovery team has received data on all outstanding cases. On the transitional help loans, we've authorised government departments to provide interest-free bridging loans of £5,000 and, in exceptional cases, up to £10,000 for those in immediate needs. Departments are working to get this money to those impacted within days, not weeks. And we are prioritising the most urgent cases. We're working with Capita to ensure the systems and resources are in place to deal with ill health, bereavement and financial hardship cases, alongside arrangements to clear the backlog. But they are our absolute priority. On the member portal, greater functionality was already planned to be rolled out. That includes a thing called Track My Case, which allows members to see the end-to-end progress of their queries, digital requirement processes, which includes the facility for members to track the progress of their retirement application, and a lifestyle modeller, an interactive calculator to help members under the age of 55 to plan for the income they need in retirement. We will provide regular updates on the portal so that scheme members and MPs can see the progress being made to improve the service, and I'll endeavour to make sure those updates are brought regularly to the House. We expect to restore service levels for death in service cases and ill health retirement cases by the end of February, and again I undertake that pledge to members today. More widely, our current plan is that we're working to bring most aspects of the service back with expected service levels by June, but we will keep this under constant review and continue to look for opportunities to accelerate progress. We will... Yes, of course.
Jim Shannon.
So in the discussions with the Honourable Lady before the debate started, the Honourable Lady indicated, and I know it wouldn't be for public today, but for the members, that members themselves might have an access number or email address. I just want to make sure that's... I know the Honourable Lady is going to say that, but just for us, please, if you don't mind. Thank you.
I appreciate the honourable gentleman flagging that. I was coming to that in my notes because I've taken the quite unusual step of doing a printout for colleagues, which will be available at the end of the debate today, and which we will share more widely with colleagues, that does have an email address. So I'm really keen that people the honourable members bring their cases directly to us. Of course, we're addressing the wider issues, but it's a cause of great concern to me that where cases are raised with members of Parliament, that they are brought straight to our attention. So I'll be circulating that at the end of the debate. Thank you. On the McLeod pension sector remedy work, which has been raised, we know how important this is for many members awaiting an update. We've agreed a separately resourced project to deliver this with Capita. Many of these cases are very complex, and we hope the majority will be issued by April 27. We're working with the pension regulator, and again, we'll keep members affected and MPs updated on the progress. The new contract with Capita includes a number of key performance indicators, which colleagues have rightly raised today, with financial penalties to be applied where these are not achieved. And I'll just say a little bit more about those. I'd like to place on record we reserve all commercial rights at present. We've already withheld millions of pounds of payments for failure to meet transitional milestones. We continue to contractually monitor service level key performance indicators linked to payments, and we've refused to waive service levels, ensuring that Capita remains contractually liable for performance. But as the Right Honourable Member for Hayes and Harlington flagged, is there a cause for termination? Yes, there is an option to terminate in any contract of this kind. These are, of course, complex and commercial requirements, and of course, terminating and moving to another provider would mean another massive upheaval of data and everything else. I'm sure colleagues would share my view that the priority right now is to resolve people's immediate concerns and issues, make sure people get their money, undertake a review of exactly what has happened. But as I said, that everything is on the table. We will, as I said, do a full review of these contracts, but our priority is to get people the support that they deserve. It's now 2 months since Capita took on this new contract, and we are very clear that members of the pension scheme deserve so much better. Our focus is on taking fast action to resolve the most critical issues for impacted individuals, while simultaneously ensuring a detailed recovery plan that brings the commercial contract back within service level agreements as quickly as possible. I really want to reassure every member of the pension scheme, your pension is safe and your data is secure. We are and will continue to work tirelessly with Capita to support the recovery programme until such time as we are wholly satisfied that the service is fully recovered. We're committed to ensuring that every member is treated fairly and with respect, and that no one suffers a permanent financial loss due to these administrative failures. We are holding Capita to account. We are going to kick backside, as my honourable friend mentioned, and we are making sure that members are at the heart of the recovery plan. We will use every commercial lever at our disposal to ensure that Capita delivers effectively. Once again, I'd like to thank all honourable members who've brought the voices of their constituents to the hall today. As I said, I've taken the step to bring a handout for colleagues. I would urge anyone with constituency cases to raise them with us. We will do our best to accelerate them, but I'm conscious that it's not just those who are brought to our attention. We've got to resolve this for absolutely everyone. So we'll continue to also hold further drop-ins for colleagues to assist honourable members and their teams. But as I said, we are doing our absolute best to hold to make sure people get money as quickly as possible. This House has my word and that of the Minister for the Cabinet Office that we will not rest until this service is stabilised, until our civil servants receive the support they have earned after so many years of dedicated service, for once again which we thank them very much.
Point of order, Anna Dixon.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to apologise. I need to declare interest that I also hold a civil service pension. I'd just like to put that on the record. Thank you.
Lorraine Beavers to wind up.
Thank you, Miss Llewellyn. It's been a pleasure to serve under your chairship today, and I want to thank again all the members who have attended this morning. I called this debate because of constituents of mine in Blackpool North and Fleetwood and across the country had suffered stress, uncertainty and serious financial difficulties because of Capita's poor administration of the civil service pension scheme. This is not an acceptable situation. It is clearly a failure. While I appreciate action by the Cabinet Office to offer interest-free loans of up to £10,000 and bring in additional civil servants to help fix this, this should never have been the case in the first place. But it's absolutely essential that this is an accessible process. I have heard only yesterday that the DWP is asking applicants for personal financial information. This is not something that any of the scheme members should have to go through. It is not their fault that the scheme has not been managed properly. I am grateful to the Minister for her answers, and I would like to remind her again of the commitment of our party made before the election to begin the biggest wave of insourcing in a generation. This situation should serve as a reminder of precisely why we made this promise. Civil servants, like all of those that have written to me and visited my office over the past months, have worked immensely hard throughout their careers, delivering for our country on a daily basis. It's quite right that now we work urgently to remedy the situation for them, in the short term by clearing the backlog and compensating those impacted, and the long term to ensure that this disgraceful failure never happens again. I hope this debate has gone some way in making clear the strength of feeling amongst the constituents and ensuring that we get the service they deserve. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the administration of the Civil Service Pension Scheme. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. If swiftly exit the chamber, please, for the next debate.